Thank you, Colin. Thank you, everyone who's stuck with us for the evening session. I'm going to try and extend your lifespan by a few minutes by preventing you accessing the alcohol that's going to cause your cells so much damage, so bear with me. I'm going to try and set the AFTP in the context of the industrial strategy in particular, which has been the focus of this conference. So, to remind you, the industrial strategy has skills embedded at its heart. The government talks about wanting the UK to be the most innovative country in the world, but it also recognises that we have to invest in research and development and invest in skills in order to achieve that goal. And then again, to contextualise this, some of you may have seen the Foresight Report on the future of skills and lifelong learning that came out in November last year. And the graph on the left, you may not be able to read all of the text, shows you the consequences for a business if it is short of skills within that business. And that can be increased workload for other staff, which is the top bar. You can't meet your customer services objectives, you lose business to competitors or just entirely, increase in operating costs and all sorts of things. And then on the right, we have a quote from that document, which recognises the fact that skills underutilisation is particularly high in the UK, so that we have a problem. But it also says that sometimes the providers of that skills training are not actually matched with the employer's needs. In other words, we have a demand for skills that's not being provided for. Then we took a look at training that people undertake, and we've talked quite a lot about ageing in the last couple of talks. The same is true for skills as well. So along the bottom, working from left to right, you've got increasing age groups. And you can see that the general trend of both the male line in blue and the female line in yellow is downwards as people get older. In other words, people are not habitually engaged in lifelong learning. Most of their training and their skills development happens, certainly their formal skills development happens at the start of their working lives and not as they progress through it. So there's a real case for investing resources in lifelong learning. And I've had this debate a little bit today with some of the speakers from earlier in the session. And there has been quite a lot of focus, particularly in the industrial strategy, on the desire to improve graduate education and to focus still on the left-hand side of that. But Ian Ferguson was talking about the fact that actually it's often easier to teach someone who's already well into their working life a new skill. That they're already got a good work ethic, that they're already embedded in that company, in the practices of that company. And actually teaching them something new is relatively simple to do. And so we should be concentrating more on mid-career employees and trying to upskill within that space. So the Foresight Report really highlights a clash that exists in our society at the moment. So there's an absolute recognition that the impact of technological change, the globalisation of markets on jobs makes it absolutely important for individuals to reskill throughout their working life to remain competitive. Industry recognises that, government recognises that. However, there's been a real decline in formal work-based learning since 2001. And employer investment in the training of their own employees has fallen over that period by nearly 15%. And so we see this distraction. On one hand, we've got a recognition that training is needed, that the working world is changing, we need new skills, and yet the companies are not investing. The industrial strategy does have skills training running through it. The environment plan also makes mention of the need to increase skills so that the stewardship of the environment can be maintained. We structured this conference around the grand challenges. I want to turn this talk's attention to the 5 foundations of the industrial strategy. Now, these foundations have been the things that have then led to the development of those challenges. So the 5 things here: ideas, people, infrastructure, business environment, and places. And I'm going to just try and show you how those 5 things may have a place, or the AFTP may have a place in those 5 things. So ideas, first of all. I apologise for the amount of bullet points on the government slides. These are taken from the industrial strategy and I can't change the text. The strategy talks about the need to invest in R&D. It's given some ideas in terms of how it might be able to do that. I think the point to make here for industry is that money is going to flow through this industrial strategy. There is going to be investment in different areas. The food and drink and agriculture sectors are now being represented by the council, as we heard earlier. Money is going to flow through, and that council's job is to try and make sure that some of it flows into our sector. I think the industry has a responsibility to make sure that it's ready to action and access that money, that it uses the opportunity that will be given to it. And that's why we need to make sure that we are working collectively to access that Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund and to make sure that we get appropriate investment in our industry, which, as Ian pointed out, is the biggest sector in the UK. So some of it really ought to come to us. The AFTP, we're a collection of, at the moment, 6 universities, plus our affiliate partners and associate partners, the likes of Rothamsted and NIAB and Camden and Leatherhead. So all very familiar people to the agri-food industry. I think within the universities, we have a remit. We like solving problems. It's actually our job is to come up with ideas and to solve problems. And that probably puts us in a quite unique position compared to most industries. We are available for your disposal in that sense. And so we're also in a position where we can act as the bridge, Lena was talking about it earlier, to allow industry to access some of the latest innovations that these universities are developing, and to make sure that it's presented in a way that's accessible for the industry. So in terms of people, the strategy talks about establishing a technical education system. It's talking primarily in that middle bullet point around the earlier educational period, but then it also talks about a national retraining scheme about supporting people to reskill. It's starting with digital construction. We were one of the organisations, of a number of organisations that responded to the Green Paper to say we need to have agriculture in this and food industry in this. So we are under the radar informed that that will be coming, and so we will be part of this reskilling. And then the AFTP has a remit because of the university connections. We can provide a pipeline from our undergraduate and MSc students. Essentially, they become the AFTP customers of the future. So we've got that continuity. We work with industry to provide those placement opportunities, to provide a pipeline into graduate training schemes, but critically for us, to train the staff who are already within your business. If you invest in your staff, they will invest in you. And some of you may have seen a version of this slide before. At the moment, we're divided into 4 subject-specific areas, so the crops and fresh produce, environment and sustainability, food and nutrition, livestock and forages, with leadership and management and other transferable skills running across the whole lot. We have very strong industry engagement in all of those technical groups. And through them and through the rest of our governance, we try to remain in touch with the needs of industry to define and develop courses that are relevant to the here and now. You can train using continuous professional development, all of which is endorsed by the IFST and then other bodies as appropriate for that course. Or you can take qualifications. So anything from a postgraduate certificate right through to a professional doctorate, and we have 2 sitting over there. I've also mentioned the apprenticeships there. The apprenticeships is a space that we are trying to play in. And I did make the point to Ian earlier that The apprenticeship levy doesn't particularly help the AFTP per se because we're not eligible to draw down on it as the AFTP. However, a number of the university partners are on the register of training providers, and we are working in that space, particularly in the management and leadership area at the moment, so that we can, through the subcontracting mechanism, allow you to draw down on the apprenticeship levy within your business, but then use the AFTP mechanism to deliver that. And effectively what we do is we provide a contextualisation of things like the management and leadership apprenticeships, so that when your employees take those apprenticeships, we make it relevant to the food industry. We bring the appropriate people in so that it's relevant to your business. Infrastructure-wise, the one I wanted to focus on of this was around the fibre networks. It was alluded to earlier, I think, with Will's talk. Infrastructure's got a number of different opportunities in it for the AFTP. I mean, one thing we do allow you to do is try before you buy. There are some courses that we've run where the equipment manufacturers come in so that you can start to see how it works in practice, maybe even bring some samples in. The research projects also allow you to access the university facilities and to use equipment that you might not have access to through your own business. We are responding now to the feedback that we're getting to put more and more of our training online. There's a huge value to having people in a room, but it allows a greater number of people to access it and to have less issue with taking time out of the business if we put it online. However, we are the Agrifood training partnership, and many people in rural places are really struggling with the high-speed broadband issues. At the moment, 85% of farmers have an unreliable outdoor mobile phone signal, 82% of them have an unreliable indoor phone signal, and only 6% of farmers have access to super-fast download speeds. And that's quite recent from an NFU survey. And then the National Infrastructure Commission this year said only 4% of the UK has access to full fibre broadband, compared to 70% in Spain. So we are some way behind the curve. And I would urge anyone from government who happens to be listening that this is an issue that is real and needs to be addressed. I know there's a lot going on at the moment in that space, but it will make a huge difference to the ability, not just for our sector, but for a number of other sectors to upskill. In terms of business environment, we're looking at sector deals, and that was Ian's point earlier, as we have to behave like a sector, hence the formation of the sector council, so that then we can start to strike our own sector deals as well. There's already one in artificial intelligence, and I would imagine that we should be able to access some of that in the terms of applying that to the agri-food industry. There are funds set aside for investment, and a particular focus on improving the productivity and growth of SMEs. So how do we do that? Well, the whole remit of the training is around enabling people to upskill within their own industry, to explore ideas. Within business itself, 3 of our partners run extremely well-known business schools. We have an open day planned on the 26th of November. We'll host that in Reading at Henley. And that will showcase how the AFTP can contextualise the apprenticeship levy for the food industry, but also give an opportunity for the food industry to more widely see what we do. For an example, we do have a couple of courses around entrepreneurship and so on, so that we're starting to play in the space where government is encouraging innovation, particularly in those SMEs. And these sorts of courses, this regulation by design and entrepreneurship and creativity, are really targeted at that market where people have got their idea. It's interesting that in different cultures, so in the Mexican culture, for example, and in the Southeast Asian culture, it's very, very common for people to finish their first degrees, maybe do a master's, and then go and start up their own little food business. Doesn't happen so much in the UK, but it happens in other parts of the world. And so we think that there is a potential untapped market there, if you like, and a potential change in attitude. I put a quote up there. I won't read it, but it's on one of our modules where we actually asked them to do a business analysis as part of the module assessment. And so, again, this exposes people to the skills that they might need. And then finally, places. The bit I've highlighted is around professional development for teachers. So we talk a lot about investing in training within the food industry itself, but we also need to invest in the trainers. We need to train the trainers. This particularly means staff at FE colleges, as there's a requirement to educate and develop people from a younger age, or allow people to return to education at a later stage in their career. We're actually finding there aren't the staff there to teach them. And a number of our partners have done a really good job so far of engaging with FE colleges, particularly over in Wales, and of trying to address that gap. Thankfully for us, geography is not a constraint. Our learning is available across the UK and beyond. We are now starting to see an international market developing. And this is largely because of the variety of ways in which we teach you. As I say, we're putting an increasing amount of our training online, but we do like getting people in a room because you get a much nicer feel and much greater interaction between the participants. But we try and do it so that you turn up in a room for 4 days, that you don't have to do day release for a term. And that helps enormously. So to conclude, industry and the industrial strategy and the environment plan have skills embedded within them. So the environment plan talks specifically about developing the technology skills and services needed to manage our relationship with the natural world. And we're in a position where we can train people to do that. And the industrial strategy talks about a partnership with businesses, workers, universities and colleges. So it actually articulates this bridge that we form between industry and academia and the need to work together. So to summarise, I think as the Agrifood Training Partnership, we're looking to provide skills, to provide research, to provide collaboration with and between businesses, and to enable businesses to invest in people. Thank you.